My name is Mustafa. I'm a PhD candidate in accounting at Tilburg University and incoming assistant professor of accounting at Erasmus Rotterdam School of Management. So as I said, this is my job market paper, and I'm really excited to present it here with this audience. And I'm eager to learn what you think, actually. And please ask me questions and give some comments so that I can improve it better. Okay, so let's get started. So what if I tell you that there is a link between American singer Barbra Streisand and corporate disclosure policies? That's essentially what I found in my paper, and let's explore together. So attributed to Barbra Streisand, the Streisand effect is a phenomenon which is used to describe the unintended consequences of censorship. While she was trying to suppress with a court order the images of her private property published by a journalist, she accidentally increased the public awareness and attention to these images. Consequently, this suppressing behavior led to enormous increase in the downloads of these images. So this backfiring mechanism or counterproductive mechanism in response to censorship is named after her as the Streisand effect. So what is the connection between the Streisand effect and my study? In my job market paper, actually, I'm studying a very interesting setting where US public companies are allowed to censor mandatory disclosures. So normally, US public firms are required to disclose their material contracts with their corporate filings. However, if they fear that some sensitive information in these contracts can be used by competitors to harm their businesses if disclosed, they are allowed to redact some parts of these contracts, such as product descriptions, patent numbers, etc., but not the whole contract. They still have to disclose the contract in redacted form. So the contract in redacted form and the reduction choice itself is still observable to public as well as competitors that may put additional information in these disclosures that there should be something valuable hidden in these contracts, such as information regarding profitable markets. So in my study, I argue that similar to Streisand effect, this may immediately increase competitors' attention and motivation to extract more information from these contracts that might be useful for their future investment decisions. So, what I'm trying to answer in my job market paper, whether firms respond to rival censoring behavior, whether they learn from these disclosures and change their investing behavior. And in addition, I would like to also explore whether attention plays a role in peer learning settings. So why are these questions important? So although we know that there is these disclosure spillover effects documented in the literature, we know little about firm response to peer censoring behavior. On the one hand, these redactions are to prevent competitor learning. On the other hand, however, these observable reduction choice may send additional signal to competitors, thereby increasing their learning from these disclosures by extracting more information or producing more information starting with these contracts. Second, the accounting literature explores the role of attention mostly in investor setting. What happens to pricing, for instance, when investors' attention is away. So my study extends the literature and shows the role of attention in peer learning. And third, although we see this correlation between disclosures and subsequent investment behavior by rivals, we also know little about what peers are specifically looking at. Are they looking at profits, costs, or textual disclosures, as in my paper? So my study extends also the literature showing that redacted contracts might be a specific channel that may facilitate peer learning in a disclosure setting. So how do I test my hypothesis? I basically benefit from the mandated disclosures of material contracts where I can identify these redactions and can also observe what happens on the rival side. So I would like to talk about the institutional setting where I think can answer some of the questions in your mind already. So what is a material contract? What I'm talking about is defined in the SEC's guidelines is the contracts that are not made in the ordinary course of business. So it should be novel, and which is also material to the registrant. So two conditions may be not ordinary course of business and material to the registrant. So you see exhibit 10s. So whenever you see exhibit 10s, which is attached to regular filings such as 10Ks, 10Qs, or 8Ks, you can instantly say that this is a material contract, but you cannot yet say that this is redacted or not. So when US public companies chose to disclose a contract in redacted form, they disclose it immediately, but they also apply to the SEC for approval, at least in my sample period. So that means that these redaction choices are not random and which should only be used for proprietary concerns. SEC, on the other hand, publishes another document named Confidential Treatment Order, which includes information about the firm, which filing they are using to attach these redacted contracts, and which exhibits exactly are redacted. So these are also observable to the public. I don't know if there was any questions, because I think you will manage the questions, right, Tim? So I would like to also give a real world example with a 10K Arcturus Therapeutics, a screenshot of item 15, which is the list of exhibits. You see that exhibits starting from 10, all material contracts. There are also starting 20s, 30s. But you also see these markings there, stars, which indicates the statistical significance of a contract. So it's not statistical significance, of course, but firms usually say that by these markings, these contracts are redacted. So when you click on one of these, item 1015, you see that this is a research collaboration agreement, and you instantly observe that firms also put additional information that start like these lines with 3 stars indicates that texts are omitted from this filing and filed at the SEC in the original form. So you see these reductions there. I also put there are several reductions. We don't observe what is beneath these reductions. Is it a sentence? Is it a product? Is it a number? Royalty rates, etc. We don't know that. We don't observe that. But what we do observe is the name of the contract, the research collaboration agreement between 2 parties. And we basically have a sense about the underlying technology, which is mRNA, used for COVID vaccines, and the broad context of the deal, which is to generate, produce, and optimize these molecules. So this might be the first level of information. So not everything is there, but there are also some other information that rivals can use to extract more information from these contracts, to dig more into detail about the underlying information, whether it's useful for them or not. So I would like to also show the key findings beforehand. So I basically rely on the literature saying that rivals download corporate filings of their peers before making investment decisions and check whether these redacted contracts are downloaded more. So what I do here is that I compare and contrast only material agreements, nothing else. Only differs whether they are redacted or not. And starting from the filing date, I see that redacted material contracts are downloaded around 50% more compared to non-redacted contracts. And in later slides, I will show you that this is also robust to firm, static, and time-varying firm factors, even within the same filing. But the higher attention, these indicates a higher attention to these filings, but the higher attention doesn't necessarily mean that rivals can learn from these disclosures and change their investing behavior. So I also test whether rivals or whether redacting filings by redacted firm predict rivals' investing behavior. And I see that redacted filings, rivals increase their R&D investments after seeing these redacted filings. And more interestingly, I also observed that rivals become more similar in product space to redacting firms, which indicates that they learn from these contracts and decide to join a similar market, maybe seeing a profitable option there. So in additional analysis, I also see that firm attention plays a role. Using exogenous CEO departures due to health reasons from rival firms, I see that this learning effect is attenuated when rivals' attention is disrupted by a CEO departure. So this is the research design. I have some data and sample selection criteria. So it's important to identify the peers. So I'm using Hoberg and Phillips Finnish industry data that allows me to identify peers and also gives a similarity measure between each firm peer pair, which allows me also to measure instantly whether peers are changing their product portfolio after observing redacting filings. I also use SEC Edgar files for two reasons. First, to identify which contracts are redacted, and second, to do my download analysis using Edgar log files. I'm using crisp composite quarterly file to use more granular fixed effect structure, and my sample starts in 2008 because SEC decided to disclose this confidential treatment order where I identify these redacted contracts starting from 2008. So material contracts, redacted ones, were always there, maybe in the past, but now identification is easier after 2008. And because of the rule change in 2019, I cut my sample in 2018. For download analysis, it spans up to 2016 because Edgar log files is only available by mid-2017. And I also allow filings to accumulate downloads for 6 months. I also exclude financials and utility firms because they have different structures and they are regulated in a way. So in my download analysis, I do a contract level analysis. So there is a material exhibit, which is a material agreement, material contract, and I'm looking at the downloads of this contract and regress it whether it's a confidential contract or redacted contract, it's the same thing, or not. And I also control like contract level downloads. For instance, if it's attached to 10K, the total downloads of the 10K, maybe it also affects the downloads of these exhibits. I'm also controlling static time or time varying firm effects or timing effects. This data also allows me even do within filing analysis. So what I observe in the data is if there is 2 agreements attached to the same 10K by the same firm at the same time, I'm able to observe the differences of the downloads between 2 redacted material, between 2 material contracts, of which one of them redacted and the other is not. So I'm able to compare and contrast based on the confidentiality here within the same filing, let's say 10K. So these are the results with different fixed effect structures from column 1 to 4. It basically says that a material contract is a redacted one is downloaded more than non-redacted material contracts, 43 to 52%. So confidential dummy is statistically and economically significant. In column 4, you see this within filing analysis. It means that within the same filing, 10K, the redacted material contract is downloaded 43% more compared to non-redacted counterparts. So in column 5 and 6, I partitioned this confidential dummy into the type of contracts, whether it's a licensing R&D type of redaction, it's a supply agreement, which is redacted, financing agreement, which is redacted. So these dummies are only for redacted contracts, but I partition these redactions into their types. And I see that every type of contract is downloaded more compared to non-redacted contracts, which indicates that there is some attention story going on, because one concern might be that some type of contracts are more likely to be redacted and more likely to be downloaded more. So this gives a little bit answer to that concern, saying that normally some contracts should be more important than the others, but you see that every type of contract is downloaded more, which indicates more attention, a little bit independent from the contract type. So, as I said, the higher attention doesn't necessarily mean that competitors learn from these disclosures. What I did is I also made an additional panel with firms and its peers, and whether peers have redacted contracts in a given quarter. And I try to capture whether firm I change its investment behavior according to peer J's confidential contract in a given quarter. So I use quarterly data to use more granular fixed effect structures such as firm peer year fixed effects, especially for R&D analysis, to control some endogeneity, like namely reflection problem, because the challenge in peer settings is that it's not easy to identify some relation, because they are subject to some economic type of shocks that can explain one firm's reduction choice and the other firm's investment behavior, because they are basically responding to the same type of economic shock. Thereby, these relation I'm observing may be spurious. So I use two dependent variables, R&D intensity as an input measure for investment, and the similarity between peer and firms, redacting peers and rivals in a given year. So the direction of the relation is not obvious actually, which is captured by confidential dummy. If redacting firms manage to differentiate themselves and manage to protect their proprietary information and increase the distance in product space between the rivals, and then the distance should increase, it means that similarity should decrease. In this case, beta 1 is negative. On the other hand, if rivals learn from these reductions and change their investment behavior and become more similar, join the similar market, then the similarity should increase and the beta 1 should be positive in this case. So this is what I'm observing in the first two columns. I checked whether rivals change their immediate 1 quarter R&D investments and immediate 4 quarters for yearly R&D investments. I see that they increase their R&D investments, and more interestingly, the first year one is not here, but they also increase the similarity. So the similarity change between redacting firms and their rivals also increases. It means that rivals become more similar to redacting firms. T+1 is not here, but we see that the effect is increasing compared to first year a little bit, and then a little bit attenuates in T+3, which is also confirming the learning effect that may take some time to adjust. So I also, in my later analysis, I also focus on the redacting firms to answer some questions, whether these firms really redact proprietary information or they use this regulation to conceal some other news. So, and to check whether these redacting firms become more profitable in the future, which may indicate that they are trying to hide proprietary information, which is useful for them. So I see that especially for licensing and R&D type of contracts, which I call innovative type of contracts, it seems that they increase their future operating profitability, but this operating profitability benefit is attenuated when there is a rival movement, which I observe by the fluidity measure by Hoberg and Phillips again. And I also see that fluidity measure, which is based on the rival movements toward firm in products phase, also increasing in the future, which also confirms my main analysis that rivals become more similar to redacting firms. And I also see that they also increase innovation, in which we measure with textual disclosures in our other project, and they introduce new products and services to their textual disclosures. So in order to identify a little bit more this competitor attention story, so I use exogenous CEO departures from rivals firms, because one study is showing that when CEO departs due to health reasons, for instance, CEO dies or steps down for health reasons, this doesn't significantly affect corporate policies such as investment policy, because the CEO departures may also be endogenous. Because of competition, the board replaces the CEO, which may also coincide with the reduction choice of the redacting firms. So in order to identify this exogenous variation in rivals' attention, I use these CEO departures as a proxy, and I see that when a CEO departs from a rival company, this may attenuate the learning effect I observed in my main analysis, both in similarity analysis and both in R&D analysis. So to conclude, I predict and find that redacted material contracts might be a useful source for rivals' future investment decisions. And given the first slide, getting back to the first slide, I do find that there is a connection between Barbara Streisand and corporate disclosure policies, and firm attention might play a role that facilitate observed relation. And reductions do not seem to, on average, to fully protect these redacting firms, while it still harms the investors because firms still keep the information away from investors, which may increase the information asymmetry already documented in the literature. So the paper is still in progress, but the questions I have, like, why do redact at all if they know that rivals learn from this? And I would like to also check in the future version, I already did some tests, whether redacting firms anticipate rivals' behavior and take additional measures to obfuscate more to cut this learning effect. And what is the underlying factor? Is there any employee transfers? Are there any other information sources, etc.? I think I'm in time, and thank you very much for your attention and upcoming feedback. Thank you very much.